Good afternoon. If I had my camera, I would take a picture. I wish you could see what I can see from here. Your presence speaks as loudly as I know the words that you will be hearing throughout the program today. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here today. I was asked to come and talk for just a few minutes about the role of the arts in a democratic society. And let me tell you, it is profound. Anybody who has been awake and alert, or even mildly alert, has not missed the message sent by people with name and fame. Meryl Streep at the Golden Globes, Jennifer Holliday today refusing to attend the inauguration. But there are people whose names you don't know who are also having an impact. Do you know the name of the Rockette who said, "I will follow my conscience"? Do you know the name of the singer in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir who said, "I will follow my conscience"? I know many artists are struggling with dueling impulses, an impulse to heal and an impulse to confront. And as we all struggle with those impulses, who can give us inspiration and light on the matter? Who better than the person we are honoring this weekend, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. I know, like many of you, I got on the internet to find the perfect quote, and there are way too many. When you hit the site that says 500 of the best quotes of the Reverend Martin Luther King, you know you have your work cut out for you. But I thought this one meant a lot to me today, especially in light of the dilemma that some artists may feel they face. He said, "True peace is not the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice." And I think that can be a guiding light as artists decide what path they should take forward. There is another person who gave his life in public service that we are celebrating this year, and that is John F. Kennedy. This is the centennial of his birth. And he spoke eloquently and specifically to the role of the arts in a democratic society. And I'd like to share with you just a few words that he spoke, remarks that he gave in Amherst at a celebration of the poet Robert Frost. He said, "If sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of our society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate all true artists, makes them aware when our nation falls short of its highest potential. We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda. It is a form of truth. It may be different elsewhere, but in a democratic society, the highest duty of the writer, the composer, the artist, is to remain true to himself and let the chips fall where they may. In serving his vision of the truth, the artist best serves his nation. And the nation which disdains the mission of art invites the fate of Robert Frost's hired man, the fate of having nothing to look backward to with pride and nothing to look forward to with hope." President Kennedy believed in the power of the arts, and he believed that power was embedded in the honesty of the artist. Art can exist in a totalitarian society, but there's an enabling relationship between the artist and a democracy. I leave you with these words from President Kennedy: "What freedom makes possible, a free society will make necessary." Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much for listening. I'm going to read two very short sections from a memoir by Michael Ondaatje called "Running in the Family," and they're set in Sri Lanka. And the two sections are titled. The first one is called "Blind Faith." During certain hours, certain years in our lives, we see ourselves as remnants from the earlier generations that were destroyed. So our job becomes to keep peace with enemy camps, eliminate the chaos at the end of Jacobean tragedies, and with the mercy of distance, write the histories. Fortinbras, Edgar, Christopher, my sisters, Wendy, myself. I think all of our lives have been terribly shaped by what went on before us. And why, of Shakespeare's cast of characters, do I remain most curious about Edgar, who, if I look deeper into the metaphor, torments his father over an imaginary cliff? Words such as love, passion, duty are so continually used, they grow to have no meaning, except as coins or weapons. Hard language softens. I never knew what my father felt of these things. My loss was that I never spoke to him as an adult. Was he locked in the ceremony of being a father? He died before I even thought of such things. I long for the moment in the play where Edgar reveals himself to Gloucester and it never happens. Look, I am the son who has grown up. I am the son you have made hazardous, who still loves you. I am now part of an adult ceremony, but I want to say I'm writing this book about you at a time when I am least sure about such words. Give me your arm. Let go my hand. Give me your arm. Give the word, sweet marjoram, a tender herb. Last morning, half an hour before light, I am woken by the sound of rain. Rain on wall, coconut, and petal. This sound above the noise of the fan, the world already awake in the darkness beyond the barred windows, as I get up and stand here waiting for the last morning. My body must remember everything. This brief insect bite, smell of wet fruit, the slow snail light, rain, and underneath the hint of colors, a sound of furious wet birds, whose range of mimicry includes what one imagines to be large beasts, trains, burning electricity, dark trees, the mildewed garden wall, the slow air pinned down by rain. Above me, the fan's continual dazzling of its hand. When I turn on the light, the bulb on the long 3-foot cord will sway to the electrical breeze, making my shadow move back and forth on the wall. But I do not turn on the light yet. I want this emptiness of a dark room where I listen and wait. There's nothing in this view that could not be 100 years old, that might not have been here when I left Ceylon at the age of 11. My mother looks out of her Colombo window thinking of divorce. My father wakes after 3 days of alcohol, his body hardly able to move from the stiffness in muscles he cannot remember exerting. It is a morning scenery well known to my sister and her children, who leave for swimming practice before dawn, crossing the empty city in the Vaux, passing the pockets of open shops in their light bulb light that sell newspapers and food. I stood like this in the long mornings of my childhood, unable to bear the weight, till full daylight, when I could go and visit the Paris family down the road in Borals-Gamua. The wonderful long days I spent there with Paul and Lionel and Aunt Peggy, who would casually object to my climbing all over her bookcases in my naked and dirty feet. Bookcases I stood under again this week, which were full of signed first editions of poems by Neruda and Lawrence and George Cate. All this was here before I dreamed of getting married, having children, wanting to write. Here, where some ants as small as microdots bite and feel themselves being lifted by the swelling 5 times as large as their bodies, rising on their own poison. Here, where the cassette now starts up in the next room. During the monsoon, on my last morning, all this Beethoven and rain.
I'm honored to say a few words today. And I want to say something about love and struggle, about resilience, about the power of art to heal. These 2 months since Trump's election have felt like the darkest of times, and I really haven't been able to muster much optimism as I try to integrate the realities of this country's white supremacy, misogyny, nativism, resurgent hatred, blindness about class and about its own true interests, blindness about our destruction of the planet. But friends and colleagues, along with my ancestors, reminded me of how my people have seen darker times than these and have somehow had the will to keep going, to reach high, to make a way out of no way, as we say. So I want to share some wisdom from 3 writers because literature has seen me through every difficult moment in my life. The first words are from one of my favorite writers, James Baldwin, whom I cherish, as do so many of you, for the transcendent beauty of his writing and the humanity of his vision. Sadly, love does not always win out over hate, but it is worth the struggle. But what do we mean when we talk about love anyway? Baldwin stripped from love the sentimentality with which it is so often approached. He reminded us in his fiction and his essays that love is a matter of commitment, grueling self-interrogation, discomfort, hard and ongoing work. And that's what we have to do now: choose life, choose love, choose the hard work. In The Fire Next Time, he wrote, "Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within." I use the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. Love does not begin and end the way we seem to think it does. Love is a battle. Love is a war. Love is a growing up. The second writer is feminist and activist poet Denise Levertov, who wrote, "Insofar as poetry has a social function, it is to awaken sleepers by other means than shock." I share with you a poem of hers that I was sent right after the election, which is about resilience and perseverance, generosity, and our inner and collective resources. The Fountain. Don't say there is no water to solace the dryness of our hearts. I have seen the fountain springing out of the rock wall, and you drinking there, and I too before your eyes found footholds and climbed to drink the cool water. The woman of that place, shading her eyes, frowned as she watched, but not because she grudged the water, only because she was waiting to see we drank our fill and were refreshed. Don't say there is no water. That fountain is there among its scalloped green and gray stones. It is still there and always there, with its quiet song and strange power to spring in us, up and out through the rock. So, do your transformative work, make and seek out art, fight for the values you believe in, struggle to love and change the world. We have the life force in us, Levertov tells us, to get this done. Finally, a story that Toni Morrison shared at a time of heart sickness over the Bush election gives us some guidance. In her despair, she couldn't seem to work or write. She felt paralyzed, as many of us have felt since this latest election. And then a fellow artist told her, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work, not when everything is fine, but in times of dread. That's our job." Morrison said, "I felt foolish the rest of the morning, especially when I recalled the artists who had done their work in gulags, prison cells, hospital beds, who did their work while hounded, exiled, reviled, pilloried, and those who were executed. Still, I remember the shout of my friend," she said. "No, this is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal." Thank you.
I'm very honored to be standing here today. I'll be reading a text from the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. talking about freedom. I'll read first the text in Arabic and then its English version. Gibran published this book in 1923, and many sources said that he wrote it from this very great place and library. And I am honored to be standing here 94 years later to read his words. الحرية. وقال له خطيب: حدثنا عن الحرية. فأجابه قائلاً: رأيتكم عند مدخل المدينة وفي بيوتكم تسجدون لحريتكم وتعبدونها، كما يسجد العبيد لأسيادهم الطغاة ويمجدونهم حتى وإن كان نصيبهم منهم القتل. أجل، رأيت الأكثر حرية بينكم في حديقة المعبد وفي ظل القلعة، يحملون حريتهم نيراً على أعناقهم وغلاً في أيديهم. وكان قلبي يدمى شفقة عليهم، لأنكم لن تكونوا أحراراً إلا من بعد أن يصبح حتى شوقكم إلى الحرية إرهاقاً لكم، وإلا من بعد أن تكفوا عن التغني بالحرية كما لو كانت هدفاً واكتمالاً. حقاً إنكم لن تكونوا أحراراً ما لم يكن لكم في كل يوم هم وفي كل ليلة حاجة وحزن، وما لم تمنطق هذه الأشياء حياتكم فتنفضوها عن كواهلكم وترتفعوا فوقها عراة طليقين. إذ كيف لكم أن ترتفعوا فوق أيامكم ولياليكم إلا إذا حطمتم السلاسل التي في بدء إدراككم أحكمتم شدها حول ساعة ظهيرتكم. حقاً إنما تدعونه حرية لهو الأقوى بين تلك السلاسل، حتى وإن بهركم لمعانها في الشمس. وماذا عساكم تنبذون غير نتف من ذواتكم طمعاً منكم بالوصول إلى الحرية؟ إن لم يكن ما تبتغون التخلص منه شرعة جائرة، فاذكروا أنكم أنتم الذين كتبتموها بأيديكم على جباهكم، وهذه الشرعة لن يتاح لكم الخلاص منها بحرقكم مجموعة قوانينكم، ولا بغسلكم جباه قضاتكم حتى وإن سكبتم عليها كل ما في البحر من ماء. وإن يكن مبتغاكم أن تنزلوا طاغية عن عرشه، فاعملوا أولاً على تحطيم ذلك العرش الذي أقمتموه له في قلوبكم. إذ كيف لطاغية أن يحكم شعباً حراً وأبياً ما لم يكن في حربه في حرية ذلك الشعب شيء من الاستبداد وفي إبائه شيء من الذل؟ أو يكن ما تبتغون طرحه عنكم هماً من الهموم، فاذكروا أن ذلك الهم لم يفرض عليكم فرضاً، بل أنتم الذين اخترتموه لذواتكم. أو يكن ما تسعون إلى الخلاص منه خوفاً من المخاوف، فلا تنسوا أن مقر ذلك الخوف في قلوبكم وليس في يد الشبح الذي تخافون. حقاً إنما ترغبون فيه أو تخشونه، وما تهوونه أو تمقتونه، وما تسعون إليه أو تتهربون منه، إن كل هذه مقيمة فيكم، تتعانق نصف العناق لا كلها، وتتحرك في كيانكم أزواجاً متلاصقة كما يتحرك النور والظل، حتى إذا تلاشى الظل عاد النور الذي ابتلعه فأصبح ظلاً لنور آخر. وهكذا حريتكم، فهي إذ تنعتق من قيودها تعود فتغدو قيداً لحرية أكبر. On freedom. At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own freedom. Even as slaves humble themselves before a tyrant and praise him, though he slays them. I, in the grove of the temple and in the shadow of the citadel, I have seen the freest among you wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff. And my heart bled within me. For you can only be free when even the desire of freedom, of seeking freedom, becomes a harness to you, and when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment. You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your nights without a want or a grief, but rather when these things griddle your life and yet you rise above them, naked and unbound. And how shall you rise beyond your days and nights unless you break the chains which you at the dawn of your understanding have fastened around your noon hour. In truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self you would discard that you may become free? If it is an unjust law you would abolish, that law was written with your own hand upon your own forehead. You cannot erase it by burning your law books, nor by washing the foreheads of your judges, though you pour the sea upon them. And if it's a despot you would dethrone, see first that his throne erected within you is destroyed. For how can a tyrant rule the free and the proud, but for a tyranny in their own freedom and a shame in their own pride? And if it's a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen by you rather than imposed upon you. And if it's a fear you would dispel, the seat of that fear is in your heart and not in the hand of the feared. Verily, all things move within your being in constant half embrace, the desired and the dreaded, the repugnant and the cherished, the pursued and that which you would escape. These things move within you as lights and shadows in pairs that cling. And when the shadow fades and is no more, the light that lingers become a shadow to another light. And thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, becomes itself the fetter of greater freedom.
Hi, everyone. I'm very honored to be part of this event today. Thank you all for being here. I want to preface my reading, which is from Sebastian Haffner's 1939 memoir, Defying Hitler, with a short excerpt from Adam Gopnik's recent essay in The New Yorker, The Music Donald Trump Can't Hear. This is Gopnik. The experience of Germany in 1934 and of that unspeakable ascent to power is one that we ought to put aside as too enormous, too different, too blasphemous to even mention in our own crisis. But it is possible to be of the view that we ought always to keep that specter in front of our eyes, not because our political opponents are, quote, like Nazis, unquote, but exactly because we too readily forget how easily the very worst can happen, and by what quick complicity we accede to the unacceptable, more often from our exhausted longing for decent normalcy and normal decency than from ideological conversion. There's no point in studying history if we do not take some lesson from it. The best way to be sure that 2017 is not 1934 is to act as though it were. So this is from Haffner's memoir, written in 1939 and not published, of course, until many years later. It was out of this feeling of helplessness, weakness, and disgust that it aroused that the Third Reich was born. In the elections of March 5th, the Nazis had remained a minority. If there had been elections 3 weeks later, the German people would almost certainly have given them a true majority. This was not just a result of the terror or intoxication resulting from the constant festivities, though the Germans liked being intoxicated by patriotic celebrations. The decisive cause was anger and disgust with the treachery of their own leadership. That had become for a moment stronger than the rage and hate against the real enemy. Hundreds of thousands who had up until then been opponents joined the Nazi Party in March 1933. The workers also left their social democratic and communist unions in equally large numbers. They did it for many reasons, often for a whole tangled web of them. But however hard one looks, one will not find a single, solid, positive, durable reason among them, not one that can pass muster. In each individual case, the process of becoming a Nazi showed the unmistakable symptoms of nervous collapse. The simplest, and if you looked deeper, nearly always the most basic reason was fear. Join the thugs to avoid being beaten up. Less clear was a kind of exhilaration, the intoxication of unity, the magnetism of the masses. Many also felt a need for revenge against those who they felt had abandoned them. Then there was a peculiarly German line of thought. I don't think this is peculiarly German. All the predictions of the opponents of the Nazis have not come true. They said the Nazis could not win. Now they have won. Therefore, the opponents were wrong. Therefore, the Nazis must be right. There was also, particularly among intellectuals, the belief that they could change the face of the Nazi Party by becoming a member, even shift its direction. Then, of course, many just jumped on the bandwagon, wanting to be part of a perceived success. Finally, among the more primitive, inarticulate, simpler souls, there was a process that might have taken place in mythical times when a beaten tribe abandoned its faithless god and accepted the god of the victorious tribe as its patron. St. Mark's, in whom one had always believed, had not helped. St. Hitler was obviously more powerful. So let's destroy the images of St. Mark's on the altars and replace them with the images of St. Hitler. Let us learn to pray, it is the Jews' fault, rather than it is the capitalists' fault. Perhaps that will redeem us. The sequence of events is, as you see, not so unnatural. It is wholly within the normal range of psychology, and it helps to explain the almost inexplicable. The only thing that is missing is what in animals is called breeding. This is a solid inner kernel that cannot be shaken by external pressures and forces, something noble and steely, a reserve of pride, principle, and dignity to be drawn on in the hour of trial. At the moment of truth, when other nations rise spontaneously to the occasion, the Germans collectively and limply collapsed. They suffered a nervous breakdown. The result of this millionfold nervous breakdown is now a unified nation ready for anything, and today the nightmare of the rest of the world. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing? You doing good? All right. I'm going to read 2 original poems. I hope that's okay. Poems that I'm keeping in mind. I picked specifically because they're rooted in activism, but also because there are allusions to 2 of my favorite artists, James Baldwin and Nina Simone. The first work I'm going to read from is a poem called Knives. And this poem is for my students at UMass Boston and at Northeastern who sometimes feel like their lives are invisible. And I hope that our classrooms become spaces where they can write their own ways to freedom and also express themselves in ways that maybe they thought they didn't have the agency to do. So this first poem, you'll hear a quote by James Baldwin that has resurfaced, especially after Trump was elected. It's weird how this quote has been coming back to me in the form of different artists. I'm just reading Jeanette Winterson's book, and this quote came through in her book this week for me. Knives. There was something about watching a boy on the train platform pull a switchblade on a smaller version of himself that made me wonder what the lesson was. When the smaller boy got rushed and the crowd made room, I thought for sure he caught the end of it when he yelled like the boy he was, all of 16 in clean Nikes. The smaller boy was fast, and when there was no show of skin, no pulling proof on the platform, even he said really at the miracle of his unslashed coat. It wasn't that he could have been a student in my class chewing on his pen before answering my question about what Baldwin meant when he said, one must say yes to life and embrace it wherever it is found, and it is found in terrible places. And another student said after the cops shot his friend, they handcuffed him and let him bleed out on the sidewalk. Another said she keeps a machete behind her bedroom door when her mother is home. How small I sounded when I told them all to just be careful. How words can feel useless in a knife fight. How weak I looked screaming stop with my back against the wall while an older man pushed the bigger one back at the smaller boy saying stop dancing and do it. So I wrote that poem after I saw a knife fight happen outside of the Orange Line. And what struck me the most was that I didn't know how to intervene. I didn't know how to stop this from happening. And I think we can all feel that sense of that helplessness in just everyday life. This last poem I'm reading is a poem for Nina Simone. And you're gonna hear little found moments from Mississippi, Goddamn. Nina Simone at Olympia. I left a country that blew up churches with children in them. A country that unleashed dogs on crowds of my skinned, the handlers raising their sticks for the sick split of black bodies. Alabama's gotten me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. It took seconds to silence Malcolm. Tear the feathers from his words with bullets singing through him. King's bright colors spread heavy on a Memphis balcony. It takes the right kind of monsters to merge into the nightmare of American history. I learned to become a vicious thing that knows how to find the throat. And everybody knows Mississippi, goddamn. But when I left my country, I left it for other kinds of cages. This business follows you, packages you where they want you, aims lights into your eyes, taps the side of your instrument to make you sing. I can't stand my own noise sometimes. The clatter gets caught in their clamoring requests. Paris, I don't trust you. You think you know me because when you take me home, your needle drops on the story of lovers that leave me for quieter things. But when I stare through your crowds, your curled smoke, shut off the electricity of my hands just to see you squirm, I mean to make you earn my sound. Listen. To trigger a piano, it starts with a depressed key that rocks a center rail. The mechanical rise and fall against each other. Hammers know where to find, strike sweet, tight strings. Vibrations spill through soundboard. Seizures of hallelujah. Momentum brings hollering beg, bringing the right touch laid on this miracle machine. When that sound responds, it is a separate free woman inside me that doesn't want to be touched. I plead with her when I am on my knees inside a song to disembody me, help perform this grief out. She is what hides in the folds of larynx, curves of diaphragm, the hold of lungs. The name of this tune is released, reaching for moonbit notes, indigo running down rhythm-touched hill, beating language into floor. The name of this tune is the sound hanging on until key releases and damper drops, silencing the string. The name of this tune is the unshackling that happens and seconds, and I mean every word of it. Thank you.
I'm going to read the work of Ashraf Fayyad, an artist and poet who's been jailed in Saudi Arabia for the last 3 years on the charge of apostasy, or the renunciation of Islam. His poems were the evidence used against him. I became aware of Fayyad in late 2015 when I was working at Penn New England, when word began to spread that his original sentence of 4 years and 800 lashes had been changed to death by beheading for writing poetry. Almost exactly 1 year ago today, artists and writers from around the world united to hold public readings of Fayyad's poetry, both to shine a spotlight on his case and to show regimes everywhere that when writers are silenced, we will unsilence them. And that goes for the incoming regime as well. Under international pressure, Fayyad's death sentence was commuted last February, but he was not released. He remains imprisoned, now sentenced to 8 years and 800 lashes, again for writing poetry. I chose Fayyad's case today because to me it represents both the tremendous power we exercise when we unify our voices and all the work that we have yet to do. The poem I'm going to read is one of several that were cited by the Saudi court in order to justify his death sentence. The poem is called On the Virtues of Oil Over Blood, and it was translated from the Arabic by Mona Zaki. On the Virtues of Oil Over Blood. Be aware, may God heal you, that oil is spread and is loud, and that oil, as said, is of great benefit. O you who have been made homeless, your homelessness sprawled across lands, penniless and in despair, as oblivion unfurls between your ribs. Your mute blood will never speak out as long as you brag about death and secretly proclaim how you've laid the soul down to those who cannot understand it. It will take ages to lose your soul and console your eyes' fear for all the oil it once gushed. This was what a master once said: whosoever has oil can meet his needs from its byproducts, which is far better than he who torches his eyes, turning the heart into a god. You don't own enough to console you in the face of time's tribulations. You don't own a tap of blood to spend in the face of broken pillars, nor do you have enough to extract a tax on that soul of yours that time has wearied. You don't even have enough to help you through a day of exile. You tremble now, so take what there is of your blood to fill the belly of exile, to gather the overseer's oil and smother their intention to drag away your soul. Ask forgiveness of the river and loudly apologize as your blood seeps into its waters. It is through oil that you resist as you unfasten those secured bras and leisurely taste the cherries and all else and enjoy the wetness between the thighs. May all pleasure be blessed. What next? When all heretics have pitched the axe into your shoulder, they say you have gambled with blood that cannot satisfy desire, and that you have filled the taverns with the malaise of joy in order to down a glass for free, aborted words, a used tobacco pouch in a box where your mother once trapped your scream, so that the river can spit you out onto the shore of fear, a kind you've never known. And there, thunder inseminates the clouds, rebirthing you as rain that will still be unable to wash the shame of fear from a river sleeping in the arms of disappointment. Black pellets of oil circulate through your cells, healing what your nausea could not expel. Oil is utterly blameless, except for its stains of poverty. On the day when the faces of those who discover another oil well turn black, and your heart will be filled with new life so that your soul is resurrected as oil for public consumption. This is the promise of oil, a promise that will come to pass. The end.
Hi, everyone. I'm honored to share with you this afternoon a poem called A New National Anthem, and the author is Ada Leone. A New National Anthem. The truth is, I've never cared for the national anthem. If you think about it, it's not a good song. Too high for most of us with the rocket's red glare, and then there are the bombs. Always, always there is war and bombs. Once I sang it at homecoming and threw even the tenacious high school band off key. But the song didn't mean anything, just a call to the field, something to get through before the pummeling of youth. And what of the stanzas we never sing? The third that mentions no refuge could save the hireling and the slave. Perhaps the truth is every song of this country has an unsung third stanza, something brutal snaking underneath us as we blindly sing the high notes with a beer sloshing in the stands, hoping our team wins. Don't get me wrong. I do like the flag, how it undulates in the wind like water, elemental, and best when it's humbled, brought to its knees, clung to by someone who has lost everything. When it's not a weapon, when it flickers, when it folds up so perfectly you can keep it until it's needed, until you can love it again, until the song in your mouth feels like sustenance. A song where the notes are sung by even the ageless woods, the short grass plains, the Red River Gorge, the fistful of land left unpoisoned, the song that's our birthright, that's sung in silence when it's too hard to go on, that sounds like someone's rough fingers weaving into another's, that sounds like a match being lit in an endless cave. The song that says, my bones are your bones, and your bones are my bones, and isn't that enough? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer De Leone, and this is my son, Mateo. Okay. I am really thrilled to be here. I had the honor of being the writer in residence at the Boston Public Library last year. And I'm really here because of my parents, who are immigrants from Guatemala, came in 1970, and have really made a life for me and my son. So this is a poem by Lawson Fusao Inada, who was actually born in Fresno, California in 1938 and was a third-generation Japanese American. It's kind of interesting that my son will be a third-generation Guatemalan American. But this poem, I think, embodies a lot of what is happening currently and has always been happening, essentially. But I also want to mention that I find it a real privilege to be a writer and a responsibility to use my words to help shape stories and provide counter-narratives to so much of what is out there, right? And one of the ways that I do that is by teaching and writing, and I'm really thrilled to see so many of you here today and let you know that, like Daniel said, that this is just the beginning. So this poem is called Everything. When the river rose that year, we were beside it and ourselves with fear. Not that it would do anything to us, mind you. Our hopes were much too high for that. But there was also that remote, unacknowledged possibility that we had thrown one stone too many by the handful, and that by some force of nature, as they called it, it might rain and rain for days. As it had been with nothing to hold it and the structure back, and with everything to blame, including children, on into late summer and all the years ahead when it would be ours to bear, to do much more with than remember and let it go at that. Some mud, some driftwood, some space of sky as a reminder before getting on with the world again. No. The balance was ours to share, and responsibility for rivers had as much to do with anything as rain on the roof and sweet fish for supper, as forests and trembling and berries at sunrise. Thus it was, then, that we kept our watch, that we kept our wits about us and all the respect we could muster, sitting in silence, sleeping in shifts, and when the fire died, everyone was there to keep it alive. Somehow, though, in the middle of the night, despite our vigils, our dreams, our admonitions, our structure, our people, and all our belongings broke free with a shudder and went drifting away, past the landing, the swing, the anchored cages, down through the haunted rapids, never to be found. When we awoke that morning, the sun was back. The river had receded under our measuring stick, and everything had been astonishingly replaced, including people and pets, the structure intact, but in the solitude of all our faces as we ate, the knowledge was there of what we all had done and that everything would never be the same. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Garcia. I'm 18. I'm here with Mass Sleep. So I'm going to be reading some of my own work, some of my own poems. So this first one, it's about the way that we characterize and label women of color and how often, like, there's this word called bougie, and it means to aspire to be higher than one's class. And that's never used for white women. It's only used for women of color. So I wrote this piece for my mom and everyone who's ever called my mom bougie, which is a lot of people. My mom be bougie. Her nails, they did. Ain't never been afraid to throw down like you can catch these hands too. My mother walks like God made floors for her. Her figure knows why be an hourglass when you can be a glass of wine. My mother drinks white wine at the dinner table. No Chardonnay tears don't stain. My mother drapes me in champagne silhouettes. We don't throw clothes away in this house. We pass down our hand-me-downs. My mother's tongue has picked from guava trees. Always dresses in its Sunday's best. Always trying to act all articulate. Like she can't pronounce everything we eat, but we eat. My mother's cooking be bougie too. Her chicken won't wear anything that ain't Goya imported. Lets you sit salty, indulges in adobo. My mom will never serve her white rice plain. Don't like her food to be all white and colonized. Don't let you forget where it came from. My mother simmers her sadness on the stove. Puts the heat on low when making her habichuelas. Likes to drench the grains in blackness. My mother makes mutiny mandatory in every meal she makes, folds up genocide in her napkin and shoves it in her purse. My mother makes her survival a stuck-up protest. Like she don't care if you try and call the cops. Like she's still gonna hit her kids. Like my brother still got shot. Like they're still trying to mend my heart. My mother's attitude be bougie too. It won't go eat in the kitchen. Will remind you how it carries courage on her curves even when she cries, even when my silhouette's stained, and she's too tired to love herself today. Her bouginess will remind me that I am a woman, that I am colorful kaleidoscopes, and I deserve to exist shamelessly. Thank you. So this next piece, it's more about my self-identity, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm Dominican. Dominican, like I leave traces of adobo every step I take. Like bachata is an instinct, and the cha-cha slide is awkward. Like my Latina curves are an invitation to touch me. Like my hips are the reasons we'll all have it coming, I'm also Spanish. No, not like the language. I mean, yeah, we speak the language, but like the country. Like the white country. Like the white country painted in olive trees and murals named Fresco, Fresco. Like my second last name. Like my Spanish paints carcasses into my name, Trujillo. A Dominican dictator offered white Spanish men land in hopes of extracting all the color that painted my country. My grandfather was one of them. I wonder if he ever planted poplar trees, if he raked the leaves when the bodies fell. Did he know that my grandmother was an artist, that she bathed her hands in the same rice fields where the bodies fell? Did he see the blood on her hands? Did he fall in love with the way she finger-painted with genocide? Was he her captor? A long-lost bastard child of Christopher Columbus, did he incarcerate her placenta? Did her roots hang on her clitoris when bearing half babies? Am I a half baby? Is that why the umbilical cord choked me from the beginning? I've always had a sharp tongue. Do the slave masters in me just wish to caress whips again? My tongue did not have to forsake me to help me hide the murder weapon. Does part of me miss the feeling of plantations beneath my feet? These roots have always kept me grounded. I punish my Spanish. I allow them to murder my dialect, to cut off its limbs, to make it fit curriculums. I choke on olive tree branches. I could feel the bodies lodged in my throat. I could sometimes hear my great-grandmother scream when I sleep. Do I just sleep on mass graves? Has part of me picked the cotton in my bed sheets? Is my thread count counting the bodies? Is my body muffling the screams? Is my depression trying to kill the murderer in me? Or trying to save the victim? Is bachata not my instinct? Do rice and beans and yelling over dominoes not scream home to me? What box in the senses do I check off? There's no option for confused, for product of rape and colonization. Can I trust my Hispanic and my Spanish to hold me? Don't both the murdered and the murderers still hold their children?
Really happy to be here. Not happy to follow him. I'm going to talk about invisibility like Krysten. I have a young friend, Anastasia Somoza, who's like me, first generation. And like my late son, Jesse, she is quadriplegic and uses a wheelchair. Jesse was nonverbal, but Anastasia has the use of her voice. And she used that voice powerfully at the Democratic National Convention this year to talk about the candidate she supported, the one who could see her, as she said, in front of thousands of people. This brave young woman spoke about knowing Hillary Clinton since she was 9 years old, when Anastasia appeared at a town hall meeting at the White House and advocated for her nonverbal twin sister's right to go to school in an inclusive classroom. This year at the convention, Anastasia reaffirmed that in a country where 56 million people with disabilities so often feel invisible, her candidate sees her as a strong woman, a young professional, a hard worker, and the proud daughter of immigrants from Nicaragua and Ireland. Sees that all those aspects of her identity are strengths which will help her affect change. On the night of the election, Anastasia waited with the others at the Javits Center, and instead of the glass ceiling shattering, what she saw was her hopes and dreams for young and old people with disabilities crashing to the ground and shattering into a million pieces. Instead of her friend and mentor who championed inclusion and access to the classroom, higher education, and the workforce, there was now in place to occupy that highest office in the land, the person infamous for mocking people with disabilities. The person whose administration proudly brags about removing health care protections and promoting the privatization of the public school system, effectively ghettoizing disabled children in segregated classrooms. Anastasia cried that night. I cried. My husband cried. So, What do we do now? We follow Anastasia's lead, and we use whatever of those strengths we have inside of us to resist. Anastasia, I am proud and happy to say, has a book contract and is writing her story to inspire and impel others to action. All of us must use what we have to resist. And this is especially true of those marginalized groups who must, as Anastasia said, struggle to be seen. My son was aware of this invisibility. He was a poet, and he wrote in a 6th grade essay, "The most important lesson I can teach is to see people for what they can do, not for what they cannot do." He wrote this poem on his computer using a switch, his first poem at the age of 10. It's called Inside Outside. On the inside, I walk. On the outside, I give. On the outside, I am mute. On the outside, I give. On the inside, I walk. On the inside, I speak. Wherever it originates, on the inside or the outside, give what you can, as Jessie and Anastasia did, to the resistance against the forces of bullying and repression. At the end of her speech to the DNC, Anastasia gave thanks for being inspired to live boldly and with a courageous heart. That's what I wish for all of us, that in the words of Grace Paley, let us go forth with fear and courage and rage to save the world. Thank you.